We're continuing our journey towards emotionally healthy spirituality and growing in God and growing the true self that God created us to be, discovering our true self and growing into that. The self that is going to be like Jesus, right? But how will we know when we have grown in emotional health and achieved emotionally healthy spirituality? Well, it's the same thing that indicates that we are true disciples of Jesus. Jesus said in John 13, "Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." Your love for one another will prove to the people of the world that you are my disciples. Now, it's not just any kind of love. It's the kind of love that is given when you are emotionally healthy. And it's that kind of love that will cause people to take notice, because everyone thinks that they love other people, right? That they love the people in their lives. But the fact that we see broken relationships, lots of hurt, lots of pain, indicates that at the very least we're deficient in some areas of our love for others. If not, some people have no clue. And I'm first to admit, I'm on a journey of discovering what true love is and how we can love one another. That's what we're talking about. Developing into the kind of person who can then love others in an emotionally healthy way. And it's no surprise that when we see hurt and pain and broken relationships and these sort of things, it's usually a result of a lack of connection to God in some way, right? Because it says in 1 John that God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. So it's only when we submit to God and we are on this journey of becoming emotionally healthy and we submit to God along the way, we can then begin to love other people in a deep and true sense. Scazzero, in Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, he said, "Loving well is the goal of the Christian life." And now this is easier in our dreams than in practice. It requires that we grow into emotional adulthood in Jesus, in Christ. Indeed, Paul said that it is our goal to mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of the Messiah. Becoming like Jesus is our goal. And another way of putting that is what we've been saying, and that is becoming emotionally and spiritually mature. But this will enable us to love others in an emotionally healthy way, in a way that demonstrates we truly understand what love is, and we're displaying that to others. How do we become emotionally healthy and spiritually mature so that we're then able to love others in a genuine way? Of course, this is what we've been talking about throughout this whole series. But a point that Scazzero makes, and a point that really resonates with me, is he says that I have found that telling people to love better or to love more is not enough. They need practical skills incorporated into their spiritual formation to grow out of emotional infancy into emotional adulthood. All the sermons in the world, and this is very, tough pill to swallow for a pastor, but all the sermons in the world, all the different seminars, all the different small groups, whatever we come up with, they might be good and they might have their purpose, but ultimately, a person has to make a choice and follow God in a practical way in order to grow emotionally and spiritually mature. It's easy to listen to something and then forget about it, right? It's easy not to take things to heart or to leave things in the abstract. So, a person has to go on that emotional journey themselves, that spiritual journey. But before anything else, we need to know what it means to be emotionally immature, as opposed to, and how that differs to emotional maturity. Then we're going to be better equipped to see where we are and the things in ourselves that we need to change and to give over to God, and to recognize, and in a good sense, recognize where we've grown, right? And to celebrate that, right? So in fact, Scazzero lists several different stages of emotional maturity. And of course, this mirrors and reflects our own human maturity, journey. So we start out as emotional infants. So a person who is, and you can be 100 years old and you can be an emotional infant. So a person who is an emotional infant constantly is looking for others to take care of them. It's really difficult for an emotional infant to take responsibility for themselves. It's really difficult also for somebody who's emotionally an infant to be genuinely interested in what other people have to say and what's going on in their lives. People who are emotionally infants are driven by a need for instant gratification. It's very difficult to wait and be patient. And emotional infants use other people as objects in order to meet their needs. What other people want doesn't really matter. They try to get other people to do what they want so that they can get their needs met. That's the bottom level. Next level is being an emotional child, emotional children. Emotional children are content and happy as long as they get what they want. They, sadly, whenever there's stress or disappointment or some kind of challenge, they will often unravel and not know how to deal with that. They will interpret disagreements as personal offenses. That's really a sign of immaturity. That a disagreement does not mean, like I say, I disagree with you on something. That doesn't mean I don't like you as a person or that I'm somehow attacking you. There's a certain amount of detachment to our opinions and to our ideas. They're ours, and we take responsibility for them. But our ideas and our opinions and so on are fluid. And so there has to be a way to talk with one another where we can negotiate and figure things out. And taking offense to somebody who disagrees with us is just a sign that you're not very secure and not very mature in your emotional health. And along those lines, you're very easily hurt, right? And when you're hurt, you withdraw or you complain, you take revenge or become sarcastic. In other words, you're not dealing with hurt or dealing with conflict in any sort of rational or mature way. You're very much like a child who doesn't yet know how to deal with emotion. You're sort of throwing a temper tantrum, right? And lastly, you have a difficulty, as I already alluded to, you have a difficulty sort of negotiating, speaking about your own needs and desires and wants, and talking with others about their needs and desires and wants, and to do so in a loving way, a caring way, and finding a win-win. So that's evidence of being an emotional child. That's the next level. Level after that, just like in real life, is being an emotional adolescent. You can recognize if you're an emotional adolescent by the fact that you maybe are too defensive often. You're threatened or alarmed by criticism. You keep score, right? This is such a trap that I find myself still doing from time to time. That if somebody does something for me, then I'll do something for them. But if they don't do something towards me, then I'll count that against them or whatever. And I try to catch it, and this especially happens with me and Sarah. But we're aware of it, and we try not to live that way because that's not emotionally mature. It is actually not the way. It's not according to the values that we want to live by. That sort of mentality is not being able to deal with conflict. That you will often blame other people or try to appease people or pout or do whatever it is you need to do instead of actually dealing with conflict head on in a mature way. People who are emotionally an adolescent are often, self-absorbed or preoccupied with themselves. They really can't take the time to listen to other people in a genuine way. And think about that. We've all sort of encountered people who, they're not really listening to us. They're waiting for their chance to say what they want to say. But they sort of have a blank look on their face when they're trying to listen or when we think that they're listening to us, or they're trying to pretend like they're listening to us. And if you are emotionally immature in that way, you probably are quick to be critical or judgmental, and that's not helpful. Criticism and judging is helpful when it's done in a respectful and sort of way that helps to improve things. But to tear people down, that's just a sign of immaturity. But at the very least, that is that next level. But the top level is becoming an emotional adult. And so there seems to be quite a jump between becoming an adolescent and an adult, just as there seems to be a jump, in real life in terms of becoming an adolescent and an adult. Lots of things change and grow. But if you're an emotional adult, then you are somebody who is able to say, hey, I need help. Or you know what you need and you know what you want, and you're able to clearly and sort of directly and honestly assert yourself in that way, not in any sort of mean-spirited way or abusive way, but a way that just simply says, I'm a person and here's what I need. You recognize and you are able to take responsibility for yourself and for your own thoughts and for your feelings. We deal with stress. Stress is going to be part of our lives no matter what, but we're able to have that, as I just sort of was expressing. You have values that you try to live by, that you endeavor to live by. And so when you're under stress, you can sort of fall back on those values and you might start to go in the wrong direction, but then you're able to turn back and go back in the right direction because you know what's important to you and what you value as in terms of morality and just the way you want to live your life. A sign of maturity is that you respect others and you don't desire to change them. People will change and grow when they're ready, just as we each are, right? And so you don't try to change others. You give people room to make mistakes and to not be perfect. You appreciate people for who they are, the good and the bad and the ugly, as he says here, not wanting to get them back, right? You accurately assess your own limits, and this goes back to what we looked at a couple weeks ago. You accurately assess your own limits and your strengths and weaknesses, and you're able to discuss that with others. You're not trying to hide who you are. You are who you are, and you're endeavoring to grow and improve, but you're honest in that pursuit. And lastly, a sign of emotional maturity is that you are deeply in tune with your own emotional self. When you're talking about your feelings and your needs and other people's feelings and needs, you're able to do so with a certain degree of confidence. You're able to do so with a certain degree of you're not concerned. You're competent. That's the word I'm looking for. You're competent in talking about your own emotions and your own needs and desires, and you're confident enough in yourself and your relationship with God that it doesn't trouble you to be talking to other people about their emotions and their needs and desires. And this all leads to, if you can make it up to emotional maturity, emotional adulthood, then you're able to interact with others in a way that demonstrates that you're actually present with them, that you're actually there in the relationship with them, and it's not a one-sided thing. You're not the winner and they're the loser, or they're the winner and you're the loser. Instead, it's a win-win type of relationship, and it's equals trying to interact with one another in a loving way. And so this all has to do, or rather this leads to, how you communicate with others. This is actually something that we've talked about, maybe even at this point, it's been 4 or 5 years ago. We talked about a nonviolent communication, the way to speak with one another that doesn't involve, asserting yourself past, into crossing a line into abuse or force, right? You're able to do so in a way that does assert yourself, but you're also listening and wanting to negotiate with the other person. And that's sort of what Scazzero gets at here in chapter 7 of the book. But I'm reminded of Paul in Ephesians chapter 4 when he said, "Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them." So our speech, and this is a principle that Jesus taught, our speech and the way we communicate is a reflection of what's going on inside, right? And if our hearts have been transformed, if we're growing in God and we're growing in emotional health, then the way we speak and the way we communicate with one another will reflect that growth, that maturity, right? And so this is how we can do it, and this is how we'll know what we are doing it, when we will actually be present with other people when we're talking to them. Again, we're not just waiting for our opportunity to say our part, but we're genuinely listening to others, and we actually think they have something valuable to say to us, or at the very least, we have the ability to hear what they have to say and to really empathize with them. Right? To really consider what they're saying and what they're feeling. So here are some tips that Scazzero gives us in terms of communication on an emotionally healthy way, in an emotionally healthy, loving way. Firstly, as the listener. So imagine you're in an interaction, conversing with somebody, and you're the listener. What do? Well, you put your agenda on hold, you be quiet, and you listen to what they have to say, right? You allow the other person to speak and to fully articulate their thought. And that's a challenge. That's something that Sarah and I struggle with, or I struggle with, allowing her to say her full thought, because I'm Italian, and the way we talked at home growing up is, just jump in when you can. You might not get another opportunity with other people jumping in. So you got to say what you have to say. And I mean no harm by that, no offense by that, but it's not respectful to somebody who thinks before they speak, like my wife, and so it's being present with the person that you're actually speaking to, right? And when you do hear their full thought, try to reflect back to them their thoughts by saying it. It's called active listening in some circles. You can paraphrase what they say, or you can actually just try to, ask them, is this what you meant? Do you mean this? Instead of assuming what they meant, you're actually trying to find out what they mean. And you can ask them, do you have anything else to say? And you can say, what is it that you want from me to be able to do or to contribute to what you're thinking and feeling? That's all the different things we can do as the listener. As the speaker, let's say you have something to say, well then talk about your own thoughts and your own feelings in the first person. Don't try to project it onto the other person or to anyone else, but say, this is what I feel, or this is what I think. And try not to be long-winded, try not to overwhelm the other person. You can certainly try to be accurate and try to give the appropriate amount of information so the other person will know what you're talking about. But there's no reason to overwhelm people. And you can actually even say something to the effect of I just want to make sure that you are fully absorbing what I'm saying, and if so, then we're good, right? So in other words, there's a real beginning, middle, and end to your conversations. You're not leaving people hanging, and in other words, this is a kind of communication and interaction that really, again, is two equals, interacting with one another, and it's not a win-lose relationship. There's a way to develop our communication with each other that demonstrates our love and respect for one another, and that's so important. But it's all a reflection of what's going on inside, the emotional journey that we're on, the spiritual maturity that we're trying to obtain, right? This journey is not a short one. It's a journey that requires commitment and devotion, but you know what? It's worth it. And God is with us, God loves us, and He wants us to pursue Him in that journey. And you know what we'll end up with? We'll end up with relationships based on genuine love. Our lives will no longer be filled with emotionally charged conflicts. We'll have conflicts, but they won't be emotionally charged. We will be able to calmly, rationally present our emotions and our thoughts and desires to others, and they will do so to us. And we'll be able to negotiate with others and experience genuine peace. Shalom in the home, that's what we're looking for, right? And that's what we can have if we continue to pursue emotionally healthy spirituality and we love one another as a result of that.